Hey, I work at Tribeca Film Institute. I'm the director of the documentary programs department, which means, I've been there 8 years, so I oversee, we have about 5 documentary programs for feature-length docs and short-length docs. I think the majority of the time here, and I spoke with Liam about this, is you can always go on our website and read up and email me if you have questions about our programs. But for the purposes of today, I just want to show you and share with you this presentation that I kind of take with me when I travel or when I am here in New York in front of talented filmmakers such as yourselves, here, Union Docs, everywhere. And I think this is a pretty handy document. I can, afterwards, Liam already has it, so I happily can share it. He can share it with all of you. I think it's pretty intact, but I always want to update it because I always get feedback from people of what I can tweak and modify. A pretty good document of ultimately how should you see your project, whether it's a feature doc, you're applying to Tribeca or Sundance, or even a local award or grant, or a short, or any type of artistic project, how you should visualize it and conceive it in your head when you're talking to somebody who could possibly support you. So it's kind of how to network, it's how to apply for a grant, it's how to pitch, it's how to write a good treatment, a proposal, it's all those things. Yeah. So let's start. So what is a pitch all about? There's different ways that you see it in the industry, whether it's you're at a cocktail party or at a bar and you just happen to bump into somebody who works at the mayor's office or at the National Endowment of the Arts or Tribeca or anything. Those are more informal pitches, but there is something that is like the standard 7-minute pitch, which in the documentary world, those take place in festivals like Hot Docs in Toronto, ITFA in Amsterdam, CPH, Copenhagen, like all over the world, but also here in New York. So that standard 7-minute pitch, what should a pitch have, the official pitch? This is a kind of a handy way to break it down, and this is kind of a good way for you guys to start, developing it when you end up in a situation where you will have to give a 7-minute pitch. So the first, minute and a half, 2 minutes, you have to give us a story. So immediately you have to give us a clear and simple description of your subject. What is your film about? And do so in explaining it clearly and eloquently. You just want to immediately grab the audience's attention. And then as you go deeper into the pitch, you kind of have to distinguish it in some way, because for many of you, you are exploring, or you will be exploring certain subject matter that a lot of people are exploring. There's ultimately usually never an original idea. There's different original perspectives and visions, but you ultimately have to figure out and communicate how your film is distinctive from any other story that might be similar. So going into the pitch, you have to bring in the style. What will be the artistic and thematic approach with your film? Both the dramatic approach, how are you going to tell the story visually, or thematically, and visual approach, what is it going to look like? Is there a specific shooting format that is relevantly tied to what the story is about? Are you all just playing entirely with archival footage, home movies? Is it cinematic? Are you in the Sahara Desert? Are you in, the cloisters? You're doing a documentary about the cloisters. Like, what is it going to look like? And then deeper into the pitch, we kind of want the audience, the individual hearing your pitch, has to be personally, emotionally invested in it. So you have to tell us, okay, this is a story and this is a style, but what is the audience going to look like? Who's going to want to see this film? Whether it's a short, a feature, a web series. So you have to let us know, will this be a standalone film, a part of a series, the length? Is there a particular genre you're tapping into? Am I supposed to be laughing? Is it a funny documentary? Is it a very personal family documentary? Are you following a popular individual, somebody from popular culture, a well-known individual? Ultimately, who do you want to reach with your film? Who's the target audience? And it's not a good answer to say it's universal, everybody would like it. You really have to kind of break it down. Who do you think, what range, what demographic, what type of person would be interested in it? And then at the end, in these official 7-minute pitches, they are pretty, in the landscape, they are pretty strict if you do participate in one of these, where they do kind of cut you off in the 7-minute mark. So in these formats, it's huge audience, huge auditorium, like it's a little intimidating, a little scary, but I always encourage filmmakers to reserve, like, even if it's 20 seconds, right before the 7-minute mark, just really lay out what you're looking for, like the closer. So this is my budget, this is what I've recouped, what I've covered so far, what I've raised so far, and I'm looking for development funding, seed funding, a co-production, funds from the US as well as maybe Europe, Latin America, somebody to work with me on outreach to keep the story going after the film is released. I mean, it could literally be, I'm looking for a producer, I'm looking for an editor, I'm doing it all myself. Like that, those are meaty, substantive data and needs that are important in a pitch. And I'll also say, as Liam said at the beginning, feel free to stop me if something's unclear, because it's more dynamic that way. So to start kind of developing that pitch, and you can just do it just for kicks, just to practice. A good way to do it is to, like, in a Word document and piece of paper, just write down the where, the why, the who, the when, and the money, and then answer those questions about your project. So the where immediately ties into that first bullet point I showed you, the story. Where is the story set? What will your production shoot look like? You have to communicate the setting, the environment, and the tone of the film right from the gate. Provide hard facts. I think a lot of you are nonfiction, documentary storytellers. Statistics, percentages, hard data that you have that are intrinsic to the story that might kind of paint a picture for us even before the audience, the individual, sees a single second of the footage. Paint a canvas. If you're following a community that doesn't have electricity and a car has never driven past the town in 20 years, that's already something. Or it's 95% population of Native Americans, or 5% the dwindling Native American population. Those are like figures that I can already kind of imagine and wrap my head around. And all of this info, all of this data ultimately reflects the level of access that you have to your subject. So just think about that. That will further distinguish you from other projects that might be telling a similar story. The why. All too often, and you'll probably, either you have experienced this or you will get the perspective, the reaction from people saying, people that might possibly support you in your film, why should we care? As funders, as producers, as distributors, why should we care about your story? Whether it's a personal story or not, why should we care? So you have to ask yourself, if what I'm telling, the story I'm telling, is unique and very unconventional, it could be very niche. So why should this appeal to Sundance or the NEA or this producer I'm talking to? But if it's a universal, often told story, let's say LGBTQ rights, eco-terrorism, and income inequality, like these broad subjects, why are you undertaking it? Why will your angle work? Most importantly, why will an international audience market? It's not just the person you're talking to, but if you start to think of how you can not necessarily monetize, because it's a hard market, but how can you market and move your film? Why would a broader audience be interested in going that journey with you and watching the film? And so that question goes both ways. So it's like, why should we care as funders? But then why should you care as the storyteller? Why are you the right person to tell the story? What's your unique insight into the narrative? Sometimes it's an easy answer for that. You know, it's my aunt I'm making a movie about. It's my grandma. Sometimes it doesn't. It's just I love racquetball. I'm making a documentary about racquetball. There doesn't have to be a personal connection to it. But something that is very important for you guys to like do as research, as practice, is what's the current status regarding your subject matter? Is there a demand for it? Just like really look at what projects funders are supporting, Sundance, Tribeca, us, Ford Foundation, you know, just really browse, scour the internet, look at what's being produced, what's being developed, what's being funded, and know who your audience is as it relates to you applying for grants. Because sometimes, and it happens often, a filmmaker applies to us, for example, with a project that where we supported a similar project the year before, and we sometimes double down and support a similar project, but there has to be intervening years usually, and you know, it's a waste of time, and it's for you guys, for applicants to like, you know, not know, just blindly apply places. Usually you have, I mean, you should develop and implement a strategy for knowing who you're talking to. And then the who is now tying into, in the 7-minute pitch section, is more about you, the audience, and the closer, kind of like what is your personal interest in the project? Who are you? Who's going to make the film? Tell me about yourself. What is your team's background? Not just who you are as a storyteller, but who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with. It's always very kind of, I think, advantageous, whether in an application, if you're pitching in front of an audience, in your treatment, to accentuate specific projects that your team members have done. If those projects are, you know, have been out, have been at festivals, have been accepted to festivals, it just shows people that you're surrounding yourself with people that have a similar mindset as you, a similar perspective, similar sensibility. And apart from the crew aspect of it, you know, funders, distributors, we just want to know like your role in the story. So to what extent will we see you or will we feel you in the story? Are you a main character? Are you serving a role? Are you providing narration? Are you in and out of the story? Is there a personal connection in one way between you and the subject matter? So, and then the when, this now goes into the closer aspect of a pitch. When do you intend to reach the next stage and finish the film, close the budget gap? So again, then it becomes like, again, hard data. This is a timeline I've set forth. These are people that I'm talking to that might commit to the project. You know, and this is my budget, etc. And then the money, you lay out the budget. Who's already on board? The on board can mean a wide range of things. It can be hard money. It can be in-kind services. It can be a producer, an editor, a DP who's well known or relatively well known, and has committed to helping you with maybe a few production shoots. A consulting editor who will look at an edit. Like that's substantive, and again, it just gives the industry person, the producer, etc. An awareness that you're hustling, that you're moving, that you're finding support anywhere you can. And so through all of this, things to keep in mind is, can you tell the same story but with a different budget? Are you being realistic with costs? And that goes to, you know, as a result, how stable and strong is your current budget? And then, I mean, for all of you now, I think in the short term, let's say this coming week and this coming summer, winter, the importance of an elevator pitch. And that is, it's sometimes like forgotten and just not, you know, dwelled on, but, you know, it's very rare for people to, you know, the probabilities are relatively high that you pitch in a forum. It happens, but, you know, they pick like 24 for each forum usually. But an elevator pitch is pretty crucial. So, you know, they call it elevator pitch because you get in an elevator and you get to the penthouse and you got to pitch. That's not a spotlight. So an elevator pitch should be as relaxed and smooth as possible. Nobody really wants to be cornered at a party or at a bar. Just really think about how you can subtly and cleverly present your project to anybody that you realize, oh my God, I'm talking to so and so. Whether it's in this setting or at right after at a bar. So an elevator pitch should be ultimately maybe 1 or 3 sentences of your project. And it's all in how you develop it. Like if you feel like you're connecting with a person and you're asking them, you can maybe lie, feign ignorance and say, oh, what do you do? And you know what they do. And then they say, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a filmmaker. I'm currently working on this project. And you guys kind of did an elevator pitch right now when you were introducing yourself. So it's all about like having that one also on hand, but also kind of working and developing the other ones, the other lengths of pitches. And so, you're developing this elevator pitch, which is like just a seed of an idea, but it's kind of 3 sentences, a hook. You have a 7-minute pitch, official forum, pitching forum, and all that. But if you're applying for grants, you're gonna have to, or you already have a 1-sheet, a treatment, some type of creative document. And for me, an effective treatment proposal is a self-contained document that should encapsulate the most important components of your project. So ultimately, if you literally tell me, like, if you just make me sit down here and give me a 3 to 5, 8-page document, I will understand kind of front to back the basics, and I'll have a pretty thorough understanding of your project. So that's ultimately like the effectiveness of a treatment. I love when that self-contained document is creative. So I always encourage filmmakers to be as creative as possible in that document, but only as long as you're clear, kind of direct, and provide context. For example, if you're telling a story about preservation, environmental preservation, but you're a talented DP or you have a talented photographer on board, show me those images in the treatment. If it's about your family, and there's home movies, but there's home movies from from the 60s or 70s, I might not have the luxury of seeing that sample or that actual material, but you might put screen grabs of the funky kind of home movie images. So just if you have a character you're following who looks insane, quirky character, tattoos or piercings, or just really old. Like if you're following that, just communicate how fascinatingly complex your main character is, and show me photos of that person. So it is that tricky balance of creative, but as long as you're clear, direct, and provide context, concentrate on specifics. So it's like flowery, creative, artistic, but also concentrate on specifics, but only as long as you have them. It's a tricky dance, it's a tricky balance. But to start to plan your treatment and to plan how to convey that project of yours in treatment, prepare like a beat sheet of where you see your subject going and where are we going on the journey with you. So I have a feature doc, and it's about my aunt who was in the mob. And so then I'm like, I interview her. I go to her house in Queens and I interview her. Then she takes me to the attic where she has a lot of material. So you start like literally, phrases or sentences, and then you start filling everything that you've captured so far. And at some point you'll get to a bullet point where there'll be like a fork in the road. And so it'll be, will she get closure and seek forgiveness over her dangerous past? I will try to get answers from her. So it's just like putting meat on the bones, and then ultimately you're posing a question to the person that you're trying to get funding for. I never encourage people, even if you have the answer already, like, oh, she cut ties with me and she doesn't want to speak with me anymore. Never reveal that whether in a pitch or in an application. Just, it's all about like the tease and about like hooking us. So it's all the kind of cliche but effective question is, will she atone for her sins, or will I will get shut out of the family? You know, like make it like feel existential and make it like heavy dramatic stakes. And again, all of this is relating to your access. Like I always say, do this example of, we have a fund at Tribeca for Latin American filmmakers, and we get a lot of understandably, a lot of documentaries about dictatorships in Argentina and Chile, and all the time we ask ourselves, why should we consider this project? There's so many out there. But we ended up getting one a couple of years ago where it's about Pinochet and Allende, but the hook is that the filmmaker, her aunt, was the secretary for Pinochet's right-hand man. And she like, the filmmaker grew up with this aunt being her favorite aunt. And one day at the airport, the police just grabbed her and took her away, and she had no idea why. And then she found out what her aunt had done, and the aunt just fled to Australia, and the film just is basically the filmmaker as a character, not believing her mom, like the filmmaker's mom, the family members were like, yeah, your aunt did that, and we held it from you. And the filmmaker, the entire film is the filmmaker confronting her aunt through Skype. Her aunt continuously saying, no, I never saw anything, I never participated in anything. That, you know, it's wild. But ultimately, it's like that's access. Like, you're painting a story here. Your insight into this is different than somebody else's insight. So as you kind of go into this is the meat of the treatment. Very similar to a pitch. You should end the last page with who's already on board, who are you as a filmmaker, who are your team members. And again, if it's applicable, accentuate previous projects, maybe relevant ones that people might be aware of. And that will kind of help you package or gain interest for your project. This slide, I mean, this usually applies more for Latin American filmmakers, where this ultimately is just different styles and forms of writing a treatment. And some people, I don't know why, but they opt to kind of transcribe the material they've shot in script form as a treatment. So I'm like reading your footage. And this is just this is basically me. I just put the slide because the treatment should be in prose, should be your voice, should be creative. I want to hear how you express yourself. So it should delineate in prose the primary and secondary elements of your story. Again, from a premise overview, you can call it like the elevator pitch or the log line, to then like start to like unravel it, a descriptive encapsulation of the project up to that stage. And then key elements that you have to weave throughout are your artistic statement, what's your intention and objective with the project, the aesthetics and creative vision, what will it look like, again, bringing in images if that's kind of relevant, and then also discussing the pervasive themes that you intend to tell, which will bring the story full circle. So I'm going to show you a treatment from a Chilean filmmaker, and I'm showing you this one because it's the filmmaker's language. Her first language is Spanish, and yet, you know, I think she kind of overcame a lot of hurdles. She's very well known in Chile, and she overcame a lot of hurdles, and I think delivered a treatment that is like really effective. So I'm just showing you a snippet. So right off the bat, she starts saying, this documentary will be a choral and extended monitoring of a process. So it's an unusual first sentence, but it's still, as a nonfiction filmmaker, she's telling us, you know, us as funders, this is what I'm about to tell you is what I've observed and captured. So I'm monitoring, I'm observing life. And then with very simple language and wording, she starts to talk about the characters. So the main plot is the mental decay of Cristobal, 55, who has Alzheimer's disease besides Down syndrome. So again, conflict is already there, characters already there. It's heavy. It seems like a very serious documentary. And she keeps going, again, very simple sentences, colorful, it moves. I can imagine it. She talks about the classmates, the day-to-day, and then towards the end, again, as a filmmaker, she says, this treatment is based on situations witnessed during research. A few of the later sequences have not been observed and correspond to an approach of what might happen. So her research process is informing her in some ways of maybe predicting what's going to happen, or at least fully understanding her characters so that she knows like their behavior, their sensibilities, or interests. So again, she's being very cautious about like not overselling something, not fully predicting something, not tying it up in a bow. There's still a question mark there. And then she keeps going. We will see it at work and at home at work. Blah blah blah. Like again, it reads. And also keep in mind is whether you're talking to an individual or applying to a grant, people read a lot of these every day. So the more creative, the more easygoing and well written it is, and colorful and evocative, the better it'll be for somebody to read it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is this for a project that's already been shot?
Yes.
So the treatment came after the film had been made?
So this filmmaker is very is known to carve out a lot of time investigating and researching her subjects. So she applied when she was still in this research period, and since then, at the end, I'll show you actually the trailer for the film. But yeah, so she applied way early. And she's, some people can pull it off, and she is already very accomplished in Chile, so she can pull it off. But she's one of these monsters of filmmakers, like that she releases a film and she's already developing the next one, and she just keeps like, it's amazing. So yeah, so this was very early, but she already had so much kind of access and info and awareness of the world she was, exploring. So, more characters. Again, it's just, she kind of got in her head, I'm going to just write the day-to-day, because that can paint a picture more evocatively. So now I'm kind of segueing into what usually a grant application asks of you. Usually logline is right from the get-go. I compare a logline to an elevator pitch because it is, after all, should be like, I say 1 or 2 sentences here, but it could be 3, it could be 4, as long as it moves and as long as it's an encapsulation of what your film is about. There's never a perfect logline, I don't think. You can be 90% correct or 80% successful with a logline, but it should just at least cover a lot of ground. And so that means they're complete sentences and it's a fully integrated idea. Sometimes, and I'm not kidding you, like award-winning filmmakers that apply to us don't know the difference between a logline and tagline. And so, like a tagline is like a phrase that you usually see like in a poster and a postcard. And these people use a tagline as a logline. So it's sometimes people get confused, but a logline should be just totally well-rounded and a hook for whoever's reading it. So this is the same filmmaker, the Chilean filmmaker's logline. So a group of friends with Down syndrome must face a new stage in life. They still go to school, but they are not children anymore. They are growing old and nobody prepared them. Parents die, they are left alone, and they suffer diseases of the elderly as Alzheimer's. So I think it's an effective logline, but it's very heavy. It's very depressing. And so when you read it, she's like, I have to ask her, I don't know if she did it on purpose or not, but she's covering like the conflict, the characters, kind of the stakes. But I know for a fact, and you'll see at the end, that there's a lot. She does humor really well. Her films always have, within the pathos and the tragedy, there's always humor, a lot of humor, and this has zero of it. So I wonder, I'll have to ask her, I wonder if she purposely chose to like focus on, the more crucial like dramatic elements, and then she knew fully well that the sample would deliver that tone, that comedic tone, or whether she forgot or she didn't think it through that way. But at the same time, I think to myself, if she just added humor here, it would have just totally messed it up. It wouldn't be an effective log line. So I think she's like 85%, 80% effective. And I use it just because, she kind of picked, the better of, the stronger elements of the story, where maybe she knew, she was very confident over the tone of her sample. Yeah.
Log line. Should the log line basically insinuate the tone as well?
Yes, it's kind of like as much as you can like round it out, for sure. Sometimes the tone might push you on another level, and you focusing too much on tone doesn't give me specifics of the actual story. But to me, the priority would be like characters, like environment, and conflict. Tone is just very difficult to pull off. So it's always, and you can always write different log lines, use different ones for different festivals or different funders. I've started to make my own films now, and I'm going through this right now where I wrote my latest one, and my producers were like, they're like giving me feedback, and I'm like, you're right, we need to rewrite this. Like, have your creative team or peers take a stab at it because they have no connection to the story maybe. Peers, I guess. If it's a producer, they might be like, I don't read your project that way. Maybe try this. So yeah, it's just an ongoing rewrite.
In terms of, one thing you mentioned was like simple language, and we just got through a round of applications for something, and I feel like, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like there was language in some of these where it was almost like a lot of flowery language, like this innovative, or like, and I feel like as a reviewer, it's like you don't want to read that stuff because it's the filmmaker speaking about their
right.
Anyway, but
Well, there are certain, you wouldn't know this, but yeah, to me, like pet peeves are certain words that are like, innovative might be one of them. Groundbreak, like the one I'm hearing now, and there's a particular project that we are probably going to fund that it's amazing, but she keeps using the word I can't even say it, kaleidoscopic, and I'm like I know what she's trying to do, but it's like, and again, that word might replace 3 other words that are maybe worse. But yeah, it's just like maybe she's just kind of trimming it down. But yeah, I just imagine like just really look for more specific words. Don't go up in the clouds. Just really kind of.
Or make yourself sound really good.
Right, or make yourself sound really
good. Make yourself sound really
bad. Yeah.
Yeah. So then another thing that an application asks you, which ultimately, it's kind of like the body of a treatment. When you write your treatment, it's a synopsis. So, you have the hook of the idea of your project, a log line, and then you start to unravel it again or elaborate. So then you have to do an interweaving throughout of the focus of your story, the access you have, the characters you have, and the tone. And in the treatment, you can fully elaborate on this. So again, a creative document. It's your intended creative vision. So who is the subject or subjects? Who are the secondary subjects that will add layers to how you gain access into the story? Again, the same thing, like a pitch or in a treatment and a synopsis as well. Why should the audience care about this environment or world? And what emotions, feelings should the audience feel? Why should this story be told now? And that question, again, do your research, know your audience, find out who you're pitching to, what person you talk to at a bar, at what funder is funding, what they're funding right now, all that. And obviously that doesn't mean that in the treatment you're going to be like, I'm interested in the story because you supported this project. Like, it's not going out of, not breaking the fourth wall, that it's just, you know, doing your due diligence. So this is the synopsis that the same filmmaker submitted. Again, right off the bat, some characters. She says that these people have been classmates for over 30 years. They finished every school course. And so, again, to be the devil's advocate or just give criticism, very heavy still, no humor whatsoever. But there is tone. I can tell in how she writes that she is observing and she is capturing these moments. It feels lived in. There's a level of access because of the day-to-day, the everyday life that she's capturing that tells me that she's embedded kind of with them. And like the focus, just the overall focus of what she's interested and fascinated in. Okay, so this goes to what we were just talking about. Don't use overly complicated phrases and words when simple and specific ones will do. And then obviously for our Latin American applicants, what I always tell them is, if English is your second language, keep it simple and to the point. And the second bullet point, it's a pet peeve of mine, or some people might disagree with me, but I encourage people to not sell your project or pitch your project by linking it to the status quo. I'll give you an example. Like if I'm here and I say, because I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and if I say like, I'm doing a Werner Herzog documentary in San Juan, in old San Juan, and it's like I already know, like you're taking like the easy way out by just kind of giving me a sense of the tone and the genre and the filmmaker. So another way to do that is to say, I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I'm filming this really erratic actor who's absolutely crazy, and he's trying to drag this boat off the coast of San Juan. And then I'm like, that sounds like kind of like Fitzgerald, like Herzog. So you're going to the same kind of, you're having the same objective, but I came up with that comparison, not you, or you didn't tell me that. So it's all about keeping the pitch, the grant application, whoever you're talking to, keeping that project of yours in your own voice. Don't align your story with popular films. Step out of the pack. Be distinctive, and just use your own words and your own descriptions. And so, some more specific questions about what funders usually ask for: a project status and a timeline. Project status usually means how did the project start? Maybe you participated in a workshop 2 years ago, and then it's from then until now, till today. And a timeline is from now until you finish the film. So what funders and industry people want to know is get acquainted with the series of steps that you are implementing and you're providing yourself sufficient time to explore and acquaint yourself with your characters, with the story, and with the access you've secured. And then we always ask ourselves, are these realistic benchmarks? Are you being kind of grounded in where you're going? And we just ultimately just want you to delineate clearly the objectives of your current stage. And once again, this is same filmmaker. So, she said the project started in 2011. It received development support from their Chilean Film Institute. She pitched here in 2012, got another grant. She just giving me a history, pretty straightforward. And then the timeline, the way she did it in a very clean, concise manner, laying out the stages and then like breaking it off bi-monthly. So what we tend to do as funders with our grantees, grant recipients, is if you do get a grant, and in this case she got the grant as a result of this application, we use that as a framework. Once, if we haven't heard from you in a while, which happens, we don't handhold, we look at this as a blueprint and like find out, okay, at this stage she had told me that they would have a rough cut. So we check in and we say, hey, I'll take a look and give you feedback. But it's a framework, it's a blueprint. And before, obviously, the grant is given, when we're reviewing the project, we just want to be aware that you're being, again, realistic, grounded, thoughtful with how you're going to finish the film. And if I keep going with this like Herzog thing, if you are dealing with a complicated character, if you're maybe shooting a film in prison, if your boundaries are limited, that's another scenario where we want to make sure that you're being realistic with cost or with access. So funding request, it ranges, different funders. But in our case, for example, it depends on each fund. So one of our programs, we give fixed grants of $10,000. Other funds where they're international and people all around the world can apply, it's between $10,000 and $25,000. So just ultimately, we want you to, if it's a range, say what specific amount you're requesting, or if it's the specific grant, just tell us how you intend to use it. And be specific as to how this exact amount will benefit you at this time. Between that request and your need, is it a feasible goal? Does the amount of requested funding and your production gaps make sense? And then this is her answers. And that's a typo in the budget. She had a $248,000 budget, budget. She had 16% secured. Then she submitted like a top sheet for TFI for Tribeca. We don't ask for the full budget. It can just be a summary of your budget. And then ancillary support is like non-fiscal support. So how and what other arenas can we support you? So she said she would like to receive help and assistance in networking with U.S. distributors, profit or nonprofit related to education. And that's another thing that you should be mindful of and realistic about, which is, besides knowing who your audience is and not saying it's a universal story, worst case scenario, bare bones, where can your film live? And so think of educational circles, for handicap institutions, for this filmmaker was very aware that if it doesn't go the commercial route, which is very hard to do, it can tour, it can be screened at community gatherings, can be screened in universities, schools, just really that ties into your audience ultimately. And as for funding requests, she had applied to a fund that had bigger grants to give out. So she says gave us a little bit of the history that she submitted to the Chilean fund, that the fund covers part of each stage, that she had a $62K gap, and then she says a complete grant from Tribeca would basically allow us to cover the gap. So we ultimately gave her a smaller grant, but again, being very clever, she says a complete grant would do this, but then she says if we were to receive a smaller grant, we would need help from 2 international agencies. So also be aware of that. As funders, we're always it's just disappointing and sad, but the funding world changes. Funding gets cut off. We lose programs, we add programs. So, but just always use us and but other funders as a resource. So obviously ask for the grant and be strategic and specific over how that grant can help you. But also say I would love mentorship. I would, you can look at our programs. We have workshops that we run both here in New York and in Camden, Maine with the Camden Film Festival. We run a film market during the Tribeca Film Festival in April. And all those things are by invitation only, but you can read all the info on our website. So it doesn't hurt to pitch yourself and say, this is the grant and this is what I need right now, but I would love mentorship. I would love to workshop my project at this workshop. It seems like a good fit. So just imagine it not only as funder and filmmaker relationship, but like as partners, as collaborators, because we ultimately want to hear all of the needs that you have. So again, yeah. So she gave us 2 options, and we ended up giving her a grant. It wasn't the big grant, but we ultimately wanted to work with her. So.
Do you know how many different places she got funding?
I think we were the only, so we ended up supporting her for like 2 more projects.
Okay.
I think, I don't think it's in the screen grab I have, but I think we were the only US funder for the project. She ended up getting such a name in Chile that like the Chilean Institute pretty much like fully financed her. Yeah.
Is it kind of annoying that she asked for $200 under the maximum? Did you say it was up to 25,000? She asked for 24.
Because this was we no longer have this fund, but we in the old days we gave very rarely grants of $50,000.
Oh, okay.
So that was a full grant that she was referring to, which we're not going to do that. but then we end up being, another thing, if you end up applying to one of our funds that has a range, it is helpful, apart from what she did, if you say 25K, to line item it. So it does help us if you're on a threshold between getting and or not getting a grant, but then we see, oh wait, of the 25K, 5K is for, or 10K is for paying an editor or a consultant. We might just satisfy that request as opposed to giving you 25K because ultimately we want to work with you. So it's just literally laying everything out. And then this is her artistic statement. There's always like a question like that in an application. Why are you telling the story? So she understood the question more on the technical level, like her artistic statement technically, like filming it, because she talks about like to make the viewer feel as part of this world. But then at the end, which is lovely, she said that she aims with this film at making people forget that the protagonists suffer cognitive impairment and to feel as part of their group. So it's very valid, good answer. But again, as I said in the earlier part, if you just are fascinated with this sport, with this way of life, with whatever, it doesn't have to be this like kind of very deep and philosophical answer. It can ultimately be, I love what this sports team does. I fell in love with these characters. Like it can be very genuine like that. Yeah, ultimately, don't feel the need to force feed or force anything just to sound dramatic.
Gotta have more levity than the other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, maybe she's losing. At least it's more nuanced. Yeah. And then this also goes to my encouragement of you to know who your audience is. A lot of funders, a lot of them more and more ask, is there a audience engagement campaign built into your project? And there doesn't need to be, but this question can also be viewed from another way, which is, where can it go? Where can your film go? If I'm giving you a grant, and that means that we'll talk for weeks and months and years ahead, even after you make this film, where do we, we're not in the business of having our docs at theaters, at IFC. It does happen, but we ultimately want it to be seen because we are giving you a grant because of that. We think we're putting an investment on the film because we like it. We think it has relatively broad potential and it can travel. So this is the question where you tell us, like, how do you see that path? So even if you're in development, the more you know about who your audience is beforehand, before you finish the film, the better. So try to implement an outreach strategy, and I'm being very generous. It can literally be like, let's write a paragraph to see where can the film and the story click. With advocacy groups, if you're following a well-known subject, well-known figure, well-known topic, maybe you can crowdfund, you can screen it at schools, organizations, universities. Just be detailed, or as detailed as you can, by pinpointing exact platforms where you see the story, being moving and accessible. And then this is, she wrote a lot because she had done a previous feature documentary before this one. So a lot of what she says is, and you can probably do that as well, like she was mirroring or like echoing the success that she had from her previous film, and saying, on one hand, given this subject matter, that she wants to, do a website where a portal where people with Down syndrome can communicate and connect with each other, share with NGOs. Then she says she wants to do partnerships with handicap-related institutions, both domestically in Chile and abroad, for educational use. Again, knowing she knows her base or her bare-bone audience. She keeps going, and then a lot of the elements as it relates to distribution marketing, she talks about how well it went for her previous film, so she can maybe tap into the same sources, same partners from the previous film. But again, like in the case of all of you, you can just it doesn't have to be these 4 paragraphs. It can be like one paragraph where you're like, this is where I see it going. These are like the ideas I have to keep the story going online, an interactive project, community screenings. If your character is very charismatic, maybe he or she or they can participate in the promotion of the film. It can be so creative, and it can go a long way in communicating to us, how you see the livelihood, the longevity of the film. And then, she does international market and sub products and hour for TV and all that. But okay, and so now, let's see. It's what?
FN and F11.
Oh, I'm gonna show you. The audio's good, right?
Should be good.
So I tried to find the sample that this filmmaker submitted with, but obviously that was years ago, so it wasn't there. But I still think
How many years ago?
this was 2014.
When the film was released?
No, when she applied, when we gave her the grant, and this is probably it came out like last year. Let me see. Oh yeah, last year. Yeah. Okay, let's see here.
Mimi, tú necesitas 500,000 pesos. No puedo juntar tanto dinero. Somos de una niña, venimos a ofrecerle unos dulces, sino merengues.
Rita no puede comer ni chocolate ni bebida porque está a dieta.
No, vas a llevar conmigo, tío.
No, Margarita, tiene excusa. Nosotros podemos hacer las cosas solos, por sí mismos.
No contaba con mi astucia.
Antes se uno más choti.
Lo declaran marido y mujer.
Yo te juro que te voy a dar para hacer y acepto casarme contigo.
Ah, qué romántica.
So obviously this is a kind of a theatrical trailer of sorts, what they probably prepped when the film was premiering in Chile. So there is that music, which obviously is not, the sample was kind of more observational and dry. It's more promotional, so it has that cutesy music. The film doesn't have that as much, and again, not 100% representation of the film. But it does, if you see the film, and I think you can probably, I don't know if it's iTunes, but you could probably find it somewhere. It does have this kind of as the quote says, like sad anger. There is this sadness throughout the film, and she knows actually she got along, she bonded with these people, with these men and women, and so she's endeared to them, and you see that warmth in the footage. But then again, she still wants to make it kind of colorful and lively because, she doesn't want to have us pity them. They're human beings, and they're struggling with love and economic uncertainty just like us. So it's really interesting. But yeah, that's it. Any questions? Yeah.
So she was not involved in marketing at all.
Well, she probably is, but she probably has to take certain. I don't know about this scenario, but she signs off to an extent. I'm sure she has to, as any filmmaker, has to take make certain sacrifices to, And it was like one of the. Actually, the film was kind of an instigator in advocating for the rights of people with disabilities in Chile. The film, the president of Chile signed a law something into law to protect their rights as a result of how successful this film was in theaters in Chile.
So I wanted to ask you a question from back.
Right. No, yeah, but so ultimately, like
Now, because this is when you see something like this. Now, you say this is what we saw the whole time, but I don't think.
Well, because.
But what
Right.
were you? So what are you? Because I was just in a conversation even before I came here,
Mm.
and about someone who's looking to has a connection to back some films and was talking to me about
Right.
kind of how I see my career going,
Right.
and kept kind of repeating, I just want stuff that's already ready for prime time.
The person was telling you
Yeah,
that?
and I'm like nodding my head, but I don't really know what
Oh,
that shit meant.
right.
So, so like, what is it that you're looking for?
Us. Yeah.
From your end.
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, it's a story that either we haven't heard before, or a story that we might have heard before, but your take on it, your perspective, we haven't.
Are you looking forward to do?
Gain as much as big of an audience as possible, and for that, that can be. It tours festivals in the U.S. And has a good circuit on the festivals. If it tours festivals in Europe and Latin America, fine. But if it moves, great. If it's screened on PBS, that's big audience. So it's as wide of an audience as possible. We want it to move.
But you're not making money.
No, it's a gift. So, but we just want, we want an audience of as big of an audience as possible to be enamored with the story as much as we are, And so our grant is there's no strings attached. So it's, we don't take any percentage, but we do ask for like deliverables. So we give you the grant. We ask that you guys check in with us every 6 months, 8 months. You send us a cut. We give you notes. We try to help you fulfill your vision of where it can go. So festivals, we try to map that out for you, help you out, anything and everything. Yeah.
You laid out a maximum on the grant.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a minimum if you're trying to do a short 10, 15 minute doc?
So we have two documentary short programs. So it's a little convoluted, but one of them is a partnership we have with ESPN, and the way it works is there's no exclusivity behind it, or they're not gonna buy it, but it's more like we're looking for documentary shorts up to 40 minutes in length. It can be anything that are focusing on sports-driven topics, elevating communities and individuals. It could be like a 30 for 30 type of short. Yeah. It doesn't have to be. It just has to be compelling. And we give, and anybody can apply as long as you have that framework, that topic. And we give up to $20,000. So you submit that project. We can give you, up to 20. And then we have another program that is international, shorts all over the world, but it is not open call. You basically apply to one of the pitch competitions we might have here in New York. Actually, there will be one here in New York at Doc NYC, this festival in November here in New York. We're looking for filmmakers from the Northeast. So that's one that I think if you go to our website, you'll read more about it.
What is your website?
We used to be very long. Now it's tfiny.org.
I have a question. Mine works on, it's history. And I've been challenged with questions of, well, what's the dramatic arc? What's the cliffhanger?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's lots of interesting stories.
Mhm.
They're very interesting women. But, I mean,
And when you say history, what's the
So I
context?
have stripper foremothers that are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so what I've done is there's a general like interview, tell me how you got started type of thing, but then I've been creating different situations, like the one that was a dancer with Catherine Dunham. I put her in a dance school with young kids that are starting to dance, and she led a dance class and shared with them, and then like just creating it so that it's not just like talking heads, but I don't know how.
Right. So how to make it contemporary in a way, the historical.
But like I don't know, like the person that asked me that kind of works a lot in reality TV, to say the least. And it seems like getting fuzzy because when I talk to people to work with and they're working in reality TV, it's like they can't put it down and make a documentary because. Yeah.
Right. So I feel like when that when there's a project that is in front of funders or people that can support you, like we just want to be emotionally invested and feel those dramatic stakes in the present, even if you know the degree to which the story takes place in the past, or is it, you know, whether it's fully in the past and just people on camera reminiscing about the past, or there is some type of historical background, but the story very much is still observational in the present. Those are different degrees, but ultimately we just want to be invested emotionally. So, you know, so if it's like, if you're dealing with a lot like Ken Burns or whatever, that kind of story, there still is an emotional undercurrent where the audience can transport themselves into that past. So it's, you know, there just needs to be always like, we need to just be kind of injected into that character and feel like we're walking in their shoes. So
It's more emotional investment.
Completely.
Dramatic art.
Yeah. I mean, I think the emotion then brings us into the drama, like vice versa. If there's drama and dramatic stakes that I can identify with, or maybe I don't identify with, but I say I have no idea how I would react in that scenario. So dramatic stakes and the emotion go hand in hand. If you make me cry or make me laugh, or, you know, even if it's set in, you know, the 1940s, it's just material you have from the 1940s or the 50s, but you still generate these emotions in your edit and your execution, then you've done a good job. Yeah.
What's the best time for like relatively unknown filmmakers to apply for a bigger grant? And would you suggest that we try to attach some names to it in some capacity?
Right. I realized I wasn't doing your instructions. The question was.
Oh, it's fine, don't worry about
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
how to strike for grants.
Make it into your mic.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, we have a program called Tribeca All Access, and a few of you have applied before. So it opens in September and closes in November, and it's our flagship program because it's like the first program that we started when Tribeca Film Institute was created, and it is looking for emerging filmmakers. So what we're looking are just, you know, teams that are promoting racial and gender equity in their team. So, you know, ultimately there has to be, we're not supporting all white dudes. That's, put it short. Sorry, Liam. Sorry, Liam.
And what is hard called again? Tribeca what?
All Access, ALL, and then access like accessing, yeah. So we give, you know, it's not as competitive there's a fiction, a scripted side, and a documentary side. So we get maybe 250 submissions total, and that ebbs and flows between the doc side and the scripted side. But we pick 5 documentary projects and 5 fiction projects, and each one gets $10,000. And we look for projects at any stage from development through post. We're more permissive with this program if you don't have footage of your current project. We accept a prior work, but we do need to see like some type of previous work. And for now, this program is only for feature. It's feature documentaries and feature fiction projects. And feature for us is 70 minutes or more. So that's the one that I encourage all of you, if you have those requirements, to apply for. And you don't need to have anybody attached. Like in this case, it's just we want to see vision and compelling story. And
Good question there. Are you denied if you work for the festival?
say that again.
Are you denied any of this if you work for the festival?
Oh, you were through her? Oh, that's cool. No, you don't. If you're not working there, yeah.
Okay.
No. We've actually supported because we get to know the individuals, and we, obviously there has to be just conflict. I know. We're not just supporting you because you work, but yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Do you ever fund any humorous documentaries?
I wish we funded more of them. If you've seen Meet the Patels,
Yes.
we supported that one. And Wiener, we supported that one actually. It was amazing. So quick story. It was in 2014, I think, or 2013. I met the co-director at a event, and he was like, "Oh, what are you working on?" He's like, "Oh, I'm following Anthony Weiner." I'm like, "Oh, that's crazy." And then we workshopped the project, and that was amazing to see. We saw the footage before obviously anybody did, and it just was a wild ride. And then for them to premiere at Sundance, and then they interviewed the producer, and press was just all over it, and trying to kind of taint them, no, yeah. So yeah, I would love to support more. That's awesome.
I like that last one. Something Bathtubs was it's about.
Over Broadway?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't support it, but it was at Tribeca, and it did really well. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but what did you say? When were you doing the Tribeca Alexis?
Oh, it's we don't have dates yet, but it'll probably be early September opening, and then closing early November. It's open for 2 months.
And that information's on the webpage.
The information on the program is the dates. We don't have them yet. Yeah, but yeah, everything. Yeah.
Jose, question for you. When you're doing when you're doing these applications and you're filling them out for maybe 10 or 15 different organizations beyond Tribeca, beyond
Right.
I know there's a certain amount of now because people are adopting similar kind of a code that they follow. You can use the same application.
Right. Or the Common Core.
The
Yeah.
Common Core,
Yeah.
right? But even with that in mind, you mentioned with the section on distribution.
Yeah.
Or that don't necessarily spend a ton of time on that. So
Right.
with that in mind, when you're looking at these applications and you're looking at hundreds of them over probably a too short of amount of time.
Yeah.
I know you're saying what gets you is the emotional uplift of that elements, but also what to you is the most important thing? Where do you put most of your investment?
Yeah, that's a good question.
In terms of reading this stuff.
So I think a lot of people in the industry do the same thing, but I usually go read the log line, then the synopsis, and then I go right to the footage. I just want to read the first few paragraphs to see what kind of story are you focusing on, and then I want to see and then there's a footage description, so I'll go to the footage section and read what you delivered, whether it's promote an atmospheric trailer or the first 10 minutes of the film, and then see how you're conveying what you wrote visually. And then I maybe go to the treatment, because then I want to see how you fully describe and explain the story. But the visual material is absolute, super crucial.
One more.
Yeah.
For the Latin American grant, do they have to be filmmakers that live in Latin America? Or could it be that they live over here?
Yeah, so for Tribeca All Access, this program I mentioned, that kind of incorporates Latin American filmmakers living and working in the U.S. for the Latin America Fund, it's bringing those filmmakers, those stories and filmmakers to a U.S. audience. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about the work sample and what you're looking for when you
Yeah.
start looking at work?
So obviously it should mirror what stage you're at in your project. So if you're early, for this Tribeca All Access program, we accept a minimum of 5 minutes, 5 to 7 is kind of like decent. Ideally of footage of the current project, but again, if not, then a prior work. And hopefully we at least hope that the prior work in some way is reflective of how you deal with story. So, if your current project is, an observational documentary about a painter, and your prior work is like a horror film, maybe you hold off until the next cycle, that kind of a thing. But for footage of the current, sample of the current project, if you're early, then if we see just very strong visual execution, if you have like 4 characters, but you just focus on one, but that character is very compelling, great. If you're further along and maybe you're mid to late production, maybe it's a long, 10-minute sample, 15-minute sample. Sometimes I like to, and this is, some people do this and I'm fine with. Sometimes they submit a trailer that is very kind of along these lines, like very kind of flashy. But then standalone scenes where we just see the patience of you following characters. And that's kind of a nice contrast to see like how you see the movie kind of being marketed, and then like what is one scene or what is scene selects. So again, ultimately there's no formula, but just think about what is your asset. Is it this character that nobody's talking to? Like for example, this just happened to us like 2 weeks ago. We're reviewing for a fund, and this year, so there are trends. I'm going to go through a lot of, but there's always trends of like subject matter. Again, like know who you're applying to. And years ago was the Arab Spring. There's economic instability, like blah, blah blah, and we're still interested in those stories. This cycle, for one fund I'm reviewing now, I'm not kidding you, we got maybe 6 documentaries separate about women running for political office, and they're all really good. And then they were all like mixing in our head, and we're still reviewing. But all of a sudden, I'm like, I read all of them weeks ago, and I'm like, okay. And then I go back to them now, and I'm reading one, and one of them has Alexandria Ocasio.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, and we email that, and we're like, do you have more footage? So again, that sample is, it just so happened that it's not like necessarily like the perfect sample, but again, a character, like she's following a number of women, and one of them is Alexandria Ocasio, and now it's like, okay, this is like the character that she should spotlight in the sample. So be aware kind of what the strengths are in your project. If it's one compelling character, if it's that nobody has access to that you have, if it's like if it's like these cinematic epic images, if it's like footage from the 60s or 70s that just look like really fascinating and interesting, like, yeah. And then put that forward, yeah.
Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, guys.